Levels of processing theory basically just says that the more deeply you process information, the more likely you are to remember it. Keeping in mind that we've got the most shallow processing at the sensory register level, right? As I swept across the room the other day, I saw red and green. I remember that, so I moved it to long-term memory. Today I see pink right over there, pink jacket. Right? So late selection, I would normally ignore all the things I see because I'm not paying attention to them because they're not relevant to the lecture or what I'm doing or what I'm thinking at the moment. But if I did focus in on something, and I said, oh, it's a pink jacket, and maybe I thought, well, my wife's got a jacket like that, or it's a members only jacket, or it's a brand name jacket, or whatever it is, and I started thinking more deeply, well, I'm more likely to move that into short-term memory. And if I thought about it, wow, maybe my wife would like a jacket like that, and I wonder where I could get a jacket like that, and I went and talked to this person about the jacket, and they said, oh, you can get that at this store or that store. Well, now I'm processing this jacket much more deeply, and I'm much more likely to remember it, although I'm not guaranteed to remember it, because it could weeks go by and I don't actually go, and I'm like, oh man, what was that thing I was going to get? And it just slips from my memory through decay. So the idea that deeper level of processing, the more enduring the resulting memory, which is why studying works. The more you do it, the less you lose it. And this is not the greatest example, but basically shallow processing, when you're walking, you typically don't get hit by a car because you're processing it as you're walking, but you're not really paying attention to it in any way that would predict that you would remember. Again, think of all the cars you passed today, either as you walked through a parking lot or as you drove here. Could have been hundreds or thousands of them. And you don't notice them that much, but you have to notice them not to crash into them or be hit by them. So you're processing at that sensory register level the stimulus that comes in that, oh, this is in my way, move out of the way, etc. But if you get a little bit deeper, you recognize and label, oh, that's a car, that's a person. I don't usually do that. I don't walk about through life going car, seat, person, thing, tree, squirrel, ETSU, more squirrels. I don't do that. I just proceed through the environment. But if I was to take a moment, I could get more deep in my processing where I'm engaging semantic, meaningful, and symbolic characteristics, and now I can start thinking about, oh man, that car, I love those cars. Those are my favorite cars. Oh, and I could get on and on and on and on, especially if I was a car person. In fact, if I was a car person, I'd be more likely to do that. If I'm a squirrel person, look at that squirrel. Isn't that the cutest squirrel? I'm going to take a picture of that squirrel. Remember the squirrel I saw the other day? I'm not a squirrel person or a car person. I'm a music person. So when I hear music, I'm like, oh, that's awful. And then I'll remember how awful it was, right? Because I will have made lots of judgments and processed it very deeply and come up with my rather quick and not necessarily accurate assessment of the quality of music, which I broadened greatly because my old schemas for music used to be really narrow. There was my music, and then there was everything that sucked. Right? And now that schema's broadened rather significantly that I have to actually listen before I will apply the label, that sucks. And then I start to think, well, you know what? Did they make it with passion? You see what I'm saying? The more deeply you process something, the more likely you are to remember it. But keep in mind that by and large, it's late selection that draws your attention to begin with. For me, music might draw my attention. For somebody else, a really cool car might draw their attention. For somebody else, a particular dress or fashion choice might draw their attention. For somebody else, it's the squirrel. Right? So it depends on the person, their learning history, and their own interests. Now, how are you going to remember stuff? Here's your memory tricks. They ain't free, but they had a steep discount. Don't go spending thousands of dollars on a memory seminar. Here's your memory seminar. You want to remember stuff? Think about it a lot. Think about it with focus and attention, and then do things with that information, especially unusual things about that information. Elaborate on it. Link it, if you can, to other information that you already know. All right? So if I got a new piece of information, and it's in any way, shape, or form related to something I already know, try to pull it in. Right? If I know something about biology, and I know something about cells and DNA, because I took that in either last semester or in high school, then when I start talking in that chapter about neurons as a cell, you should start linking those concepts together. In other words, you want to elaborate on that. And you would start thinking about, okay, cell body. What might the cell body of a neuron look like that would distinguish it from, say, a plant cell? right? What's these dendrites? How is that different? And what you're doing is using the new information, and by comparing it to the old information, you're elaborating on it. Try to make it, if you can, personally relevant, because that helps you to remember things as well. Elaborative rehearsal, you know that maintenance rehearsal is saying the same thing over and over and over and over again. Over and over and over and over again. If you do the same thing over and over and over again, you're likely to remember it. If you study it over and over and over again, even if you don't elaborate on it, you're likely to remember it. But if you elaborate on it, you're much more likely to remember it. So elaborative rehearsal. So without talking to each other, and without looking at what might have been written down at the last class, because I think we're probably far enough, write down the number that I said the other day if you were in class. If you weren't here, you won't know what I'm talking about. You can't remember what you didn't perceive. Remember? I gave you all a number, and I said remember it. You got 20 seconds to write it down. But don't talk, because that's using each other's memory, which is not a bad strategy in some cases, but it will fail to demonstrate what we're talking about. 10 more seconds. They go faster this time. All right. 7 digits. Anybody want to volunteer them digits? Go ahead.
4643212.
Anybody else?
3642421.
Got it. Yours was close, right? So you didn't totally forget it. You got digits, but they were transposed. Now, do you know how you know that? Did you just read it earlier today on your notes, or
No.
you just remembered it?
Just remembered it.
How many people actually got it correct? Y'all are the very few. What we see is a normal distribution, right? Where very few people remember that information. The correct one was 3642421. Now you can remember it that day because you went 3642421, 3642421, 3642421, or you were part of the half of the people that got most of it but not all of it right. To remember it now would be kind of weird. Not in a bad way, but in an unusual way, right? Because you haven't practiced it since then. The reason I remember it, why? Not because I elaborately rehearsed it, but because I said it over and over and over as a child, and it's still in there in long-term memory. But if you went 3642421, I might think of it in different ways. If I was trying to remember that number, I might start to do mathematics. I might go, well, 3 plus 6. No, that's not good. I might go, oh, my best friend's 36-year-old, he's got a 4-year-old. 364, 364. 2421, I might say, oh, I got a good friend, they're 24, and their wife or their husband or whomever is 21. In other words, what am I doing? Elaborating on the number. It's just a number until you elaborate on it. When you elaborate on it and you connect it to information you already possess, then you're more likely to remember it. That sounds like a big old trick, but really what you're doing is now you're just using that information more. Now you're using that number more frequently and in a different context, meaning you're focusing your attention on it. And by focusing your attention, you're more likely to remember it.